Hello and welcome to In Conversation with Kashmir Times. I'm Anuradha Bhasin. The Indian Supreme Court has restored the life prison sentences for the 11 men convicted of raping Bilkis Bano during the communal riots in Gujarat in 2002. The 11 men who were convicted for gang rape and murdering 7 members of Bilkis Bano's family, including her 3-year-old daughter, were released last year by the Gujarat government. Joining me today is Revati Laul, a journalist, author, and an activist. She is one of the petitioners, among the first, along with Subhashini Ali and Rekha Verma, who challenged the Supreme Court in the Supreme Court the remission of the 11 convicts. Thank you for taking out time, Revati.
Thanks for having me, Anuradha.
So, how do you see the judgment? Has justice been done?
Absolutely. And it's a chink in a very dark tunnel of toxic hate that we all inhabit now. And I think that it's quite it's encouraging for so many reasons because India's 75th year of independence and the Independence Day celebration of our 75th year as a republic, as an independent republic, August 15th, 2022, was used by the central government and not just the state government of Gujarat, because the sanction for the release of the 11 convicts of this pogrom against Muslims was sanctioned by the Home Ministry. This is there in the judgment. And basically, the optics of it is that there's a massive orchestra of hate in which we are its audience, and we want this. And so, therefore, what the judgment did was to strike a blow at the heart of this toxic politics of hate in India, to say, sorry, but this is against the rule of law. The state has committed fraud by falsifying evidence and keeping stuff from the court. And if there is no rule of law, there is no state. And these 11 men going back unravels the judicial pretense and the fig leaf that there is a state that is not supporting this toxic politics, because this politics is being supported to the fullest by by our power brokers, not just by the people who sanctioned the release of the convicts, but also the Home Ministry of India that gave a red tick to say, yes, these men can be released. And then to make a ceremony of this grotesque hate by saying India's 75th year of independence will be used as the occasion for this release sends out the message that basically minorities and women do not count except as objects of the fantasy of hate of the majority. There was a death blow to that. But it is up to us as the audience of the and the voyeurs who consume this politics of hate across the country to stop consuming it. It is being supplied to us because we like it. And that is the bold truth, Anuradha, you and I have to face up to as mirrors of our society, as keepers of some sort of some semblance of truth in times of falsehood. This is the truth we have to tell ourselves because it's a very ugly truth and we don't like to look at it.
Yeah, when the convicts were released, there were many celebrations by the Hindu majoritarian groups, and they were garlanded and taken out in processions, and many of us were shocked. You went beyond that.
Yes. But
What compelled you
the
to approach the
celebration and
court?
the celebration by Hindu groups, these are non-state actors. But for the state to use India's 75th year of independence is a whole different thing. That's why I keep underlining that, because that is official. Nothing the BJP and our government ever says or does can take away from the fact that the state did this. Just like the Congress cannot get around the fact that in 1986 they wrote a new law to prevent Muslim women from getting alimony for divorce, and that was the Shah Bano case, saying Muslim women will have to follow Sharia law. And in doing that, they struck the first death blow to our secular fabric and made it seem like power and appeasing Muslims was the only important thing, and they gave a chink in the door for the BJP forever. Now there is a chink in the door on the opposite side, and the court has stood by these basic constitutional principles and the principles of justice and humanity worldwide in saying that this is against the rule of law and it is fraud. And that is why I'm saying that non-state actors garlanding convicts is different from the state using our 75th year of independence for it. That's a very, very different order of atrocity. What made me do this? I feel that the whole reason I became a journalist, just like you, Anuradha, is because the Babri Masjid was demolished in 1992 by Hindu mobs while I was a student in college, and that was my first reckoning with this dark side that India has. You know, the other face of India that I wasn't exposed to, living in a little bubble in Delhi as an upper caste, upper middle class person, not aware that there's all of this bubbling under the surface. And that reckoning of that horror and the destruction of the mosque left an indelible imprint in my mind. And I said that the reason I became a journalist is because I realized that politics is personal. It ought to be, and it ought to strike at the very heart of who you are, your basic identity as a person. Are you someone that stands up against hate, or are you someone who promotes this hate? When the fault line is so deep, then I felt that the reason I decided to be a teller of truth and of facts is because I could have easily been a member of a mob if it wasn't for the fact that I read, that I was exposed, and that a lot of people are not reading and are not exposed to the truth. So I felt that it was important to tell those stories repeatedly, and that's why I became a journalist in the first place. So when this travesty or this grotesque magnitude of it happened, that it engulfed us all, and Subhasini Ali, who took the lead in tying up with Kapil Sibal, or a senior legal counsel, and decided to file this petition. And they were looking for a third petitioner after they had already signed on Rupreka Verma. And they said, "Would you like to be one of the petitioners?" Because they felt I had a locus standi on Gujarat. I'd reported there after the 2002 riots for NDTV. I wrote a book called The Anatomy of Hate about the people who were part of the mob. One of them met Bilkis Bano, and therefore he changed his mind and went from being an almost fanatic to a left liberal atheist. And that's why this story was so important and dear to me, and I felt I had to be a part of this petition.
The Supreme Court verdict has used strong words, like usurpation of power and that the order was obtained by fraud. You've said it's not just the Gujarat government, and of course, yeah, the Home Minister, the Union Home Ministry, okayed the remissions. Uh, so these observations actually tell us about, how the power or is abused by the executive, as you said. So it's important for courts to take a stand and check such brazen abuse of power, I think everybody will agree. But whether this blatant abuse of power is an aberration or is it a norm? And do you think that the court should have gone beyond the strong strictures and fixed responsibility, held the executive accountable, and kind of fixed culpability to set an example? Uh, you s-
I think what they did do, Anuradha, is that they did do that. If they had gone further, it could have been used to, for example, if someone else ever wants to appeal for pardon in some other kind of case, which we can't imagine, they didn't want to allow executive overreach. I think what they've done is an absolutely sterling thing by saying two things. They said the rule of law has been trashed. They took the government to task, as you said, for saying that they committed fraud, falsified facts. Um, but they also did one more thing. They said that it wasn't in the jurisdiction of the Gujarat government to release these people in the first place because the case was tried in Maharashtra. And
yeah.
secondly, they said that even bigger than that, when a judgment is passed, and if you decide as a government to remit the sentence of someone, you have to first go to the judge who passed the order and ask that judge's permission, which the Gujarat government did not do. So what they have done is they've set a very strong legal precedent which has to be followed because it's now set by the highest court. So if anyone else, if even these convicts want to apply now through the court of Maharashtra for remission, the consent of the judge who passed their conviction order will have to be taken first. Only if that
Yes.
judge says yes. So that is something that prevents the executive from overreach. If they had gone and said more, they could have probably opened up a can of worms which can forever be twisted and used in many other ways. So judges have to also look at what is the role of the judiciary. Should the judiciary be doing the job of the executive? And if it does that, what is the other danger to our democracy? So I think that legally they've done what they could do. What we have to do as citizens, I think, which is so crucial, is to use this judgment to put a foot in the door, like the BJP did when they put a foot in the door by using the Shah Bano case to nail the lies of the Congress. We have to forever use this to nail the lies of this government, and to show that there is it is shambolic when the Prime Minister on the 75th year of India's independence speaks from the ramparts of India's Red Fort and makes a speech saying women's safety is my first priority, and then releases people who gang raped a woman. Then कटनी और करनी में फर्क सबको नजर आ रहा है जी. And it is up to us to take this moment and use it, weaponize it, give it the light that Bilkis Bano has showed us. Use this streak of light and make it brighter and expand it. That is not the job of the court. That is our job, the job of the media, and also the job of every citizen watching this cast of yours, to say the next time I decide to go to a literary festival where a former rapist is being feted, which happens all the time. So I buy a product by a corporate which upholds this politics of hate. Then what am I doing? Am I Bilkising this moment in my head? Am I making sure that another Bilkis happens, or making sure that another Bilkis doesn't happen? That is how we have to use this moment. The court can't do more than what it's done. I think the rest of it is up to us.
Yeah, but the court, you see, I mean, this is a kind of a rare judgment in times like these,
Yes,
when
yes.
the courts are heavily tilted towards a Hindu majoritarian force. So when the court has stated on legal grounds that the Gujarat government had no power to order the remissions, but this also suggests that Maharashtra government could do the same, and there's a BJP government in Maharashtra. You mentioned that permission has to be taken from the same judge who signed the convictions, but that's pretty much possible in times like these. So
I don't
how do you
know.
think there is a safeguard?
I think the final safeguard cannot be that we wring the judge's neck and say, don't you dare pass a contrary order now that there is a BJP government. It is up to us to stop feeding this fire of hate. It's being provided to us all the time because we want it. We are the consumers of it. Let me give a very easy example. Okay, 20 years ago, nobody went to an organic food shop and bought organic rice or organic rajma or organic vegetables because it was expensive. And people said, I don't care if I die of stomach cancer, but I'm going to have no money in my pocket. So her demand was created over time for organic food. And only then did the supply chain change. And when the supply chain changed, we started consuming better food and looking at the packaging of what we're consuming. And then the market for it started to grow. And now people are conscious of what they eat. So, similarly, we have to change the demand for this kind of toxic politics, because otherwise, you take out a BJP and you replace it with the Aam Aadmi Party, you replace it with the Congress, and they're all giving you the same toxic politics in a slightly varied version of each other, because that is what it takes to keep power in this country. That is what they are doing. They're professional politicians, and they brook no they will use everything in their power to keep power. So we have to change the dynamics for ourselves. Someone who's playing this political game is not going to stop playing it just because it's not a nice thing to do. So obviously that's not going to happen. So we have to not want it. We like this. Everyone is getting ready to go to Ayodhya to celebrate something which started with the desecration of a mosque. Where is the reporting on the connection between the celebration of Ayodhya and the
Yeah.
desecration of the mosque, except in your kind of media space, which only like-minded people are reading and watching? So how are we converting people back from this toxic idea? How are we reaching out to people who are not like us? The right wing constantly expands by reaching out to people who are not like them and expanding, and we talk to only each other. So we have to think structurally and we have to Bilkis each moment and say we are not going to allow this moment to be frittered away. We're going to expand this moment and we're going to tear this streak of light and make it so bright that it cuts out the dark. And to do that, we have to break down, just like Hannah Arendt said, when she was writing about Nazi Germany, that she was talking about the banality of evil, how you can't just look at the concentration camps. You have to look at why there was so much anti-Semitism all across Europe, why people hated Jews, and you break it down into the everyday. Similarly, the undoing of this kind of evil has to also be broken down into the banal, into the everyday. The banality of unevil is what I like to call it, has to be broken down by everyday actions by us. What can people watching this do? Can you stay away from that next lit fest? Can you stay away from buying a product by a sponsor of the politics of hate? Can you stay away from relationships, people, relatives, housing societies, real estate projects that uphold this politics? Otherwise, what are you doing? So it's up to us, because the court can't do that job for us. And the politicians are not going to do it because they're too busy keeping power for themselves. They're not going to want to diminish their power.
Right. You are someone who has worked a lot on the ground in Gujarat and other situations of communal strife. And you've written a book, Anatomy of Hate, which is a brilliant piece of work that delves deep into the psychology of the perpetrators of Gujarat violence in 2002. And you bring out, I'm not telling you, I'm saying this for the audience, you brought out in
Yes, of course.
different narratives to show their proximity to violent situations or indoctrination as some of the factors that promoted these perpetrators. So what can you tell us about how perpetrators justify their acts of committing such heinous crimes as rapes and murders? And
Thanks for asking that, Anuradha. It's I think we tend to look at the right wing as a monolith, and I used to look at it as a very powerful monolith until I started work on the anatomy of hate, and I realized two or three very crucial things in the writing of this book, which is that hate actually breaks down into very small parts, and many of them are contradictory. A lot of people don't really believe what they say, just like most people don't believe what they say when you ask them, who are you going to vote for? Do you like this? Do you like that? And people don't tell you the truth. They don't actually necessarily subscribe to the ideology of the right wing or the politics of hate in straight lines. And when you break it down, you see, like, for example, the place I live in now in Western Uttar Pradesh, in a small district called Shamli, where we work on getting people entitlements, sustainability, livelihoods, we see that a lot of castes who support a toxic politics do it because they need, like, let's take a caste like the Kashyaps. They're a middling OBC caste. They are obliterated in terms of power and money by another OBC caste, the Jats. And the Jats basically have so much land, and the Kashyaps work as landless labor. And they're tortured, and they're given hardly any wages, and they have to borrow money from these people. So they vote for a big right wing Hindutva label because they feel it protects them, not because they subscribe to its politics. So a lot of the times when people participate in a mob, like one of the protagonists of my book, comes from a tribe called the Bhils in central Gujarat, and he always wondered whether his father was an alcoholic, and he always questioned whether being a Bhil was something not so nice, because he used to be made fun of for having a big nose in his class and teased. He pushed himself very hard. He used to go to bhajans, and that's how he got indoctrinated into the Vishwa Hindu Parishad, for being a very bright boy, for singing well. And Whereas most other people in his village didn't even finish beyond class 3 or 4. He went to school, he went to college, and then he ended up as a daily wage laborer. So I said, what was the point of this education? It didn't give him a better identity. It didn't give him power. It didn't give him money. But when he joined the Sangh, it gave him all three. So if we want this politics to not succeed, what are we giving people like this? What opportunities are we giving them on the other side? Should they believe that we say, Acha, Hindu, Muslim, bhai, bhai? It's rubbish. It doesn't mean anything on the ground. Unless you can make a fraternity of many people, of many castes and religions, one that actually adds to their power, money, and status, is going to not stick. So
You
we are not actually making Ambedkar's values of social justice walk on the ground. We have to learn to give them legs. We have to build alternative kinds of ways of giving people power, of enabling them. If we want them to believe that diversity is power, then we have to make that power count on the ground. That's what the Sangh has done. And that's what people who don't like the Sangh have to also do.
there's also the psychology of the cheerleaders. And it's not just the
Yes,
government, it's not just the Hindu right wing. In an
yes.
India of today, we
Yeah, I'm
see,
talking
like in
about
this
everyday
case,
people.
yeah, everyday people. Like in this case, these men are being garlanded, they were being celebrated, they were being received, and they were being received by ordinary people. We've seen the same thing happen in many cases of lynching of Muslims, in
Yes.
cases where people are attacked, and there is a whole band of cheerleaders who are clapping and jeering and egging them on.
So the hate
What
crime is
is
being
the
committed
psychology
precisely.
of the cheerleader?
So that's what I'm saying. There is no one psychology, there are many psychologies. And these people are doing this because it helps magnify their identity in some way. It helps them be, it gives them power to be part of this large Hindu umbrella. More power than they otherwise have. You and I already are upper class, elite, upper caste. We already have power. So we don't know what it feels like to be emasculated, to not have power, and to scramble for everything from getting a tube well to getting the pond cleaned of rubbish outside your house. And to not have that kind of power, to have to bathe in the open, to feel small and insignificant all the time is not a nice thing. So you will grab power wherever you see it. And if this is where you see it, that's what you'll use for your identity. If this is what is expected to you, this performance politics, the performance is the politics. The lynch mob is the politics. The lynch mob exists because the lynch mob gets power from each other. The bullying helps magnify them, otherwise they don't have a personality. It's like the bully in a small class in school or the bully character in a film who is a bully because otherwise he's nothing. He's a scared, sort of uncertain person who doesn't like himself very much. And this gives him an alternative identity. And the reason they have to shout so much and perform is because, you always do that when you're hollowed out from the inside. You need to shout louder.
Yeah, and then there is also the third actor in this whole orchestra, which is the silent and the hidden perpetrator, which are usually people in positions of power. And this hasn't happened only when, with India transforming into a Hindu majoritarian landscape. It has happened even before, where different people in the executive, in the bureaucracy, they have abused power to provide some kind of a tacit protection to perpetrators of hatred, to perpetrators of sexual violence. And they could be subverting the legal justice system and doing much more. And what is their anatomy like? It's not always about hate politics, but
No, it's holding on to that job, holding on to again their identity, the home loan that they've taken, the school which has an expensive fee that the kid has to go to, and so you can't afford to be out on your bum with no job, you don't have land, you have to pay EMIs for your house. So that's, when the middle class began to take over the politics of India, it's no coincidence that India's economy opened up to private capital in 1990. From being a closed economy, we so became an open economy. And 1 year late, 1.5 years later, the Babri Mosque is demolished. So there's a direct connection between the middle class taking center stage and our politics becoming performative politics of hate. Why? The connection is so clear because this middle class felt emasculated by an elite that always sat on top of them and said, "You, with your bullshit ideas and your intolerance, you shut up. You have no right to exist." So they said, "You shut up, actually. I'm going to invert this. If you want liberal, social, secular, I'm going to make it illiberal, bigoted, centrist." So why is there an inversion? Because we don't like to unseat ourselves. The elite has always wanted to own the narrative. We have to stop owning the narrative if we want this politics to change.
And there's a related question that your co-petitioner Subhashini Ali has raised. I was reading her interview with the Rediff, and
Yes,
she asks, why did the government go out on a limb for these 11 men convicted of rape and mass murder?
absolutely.
What did these men mean to the government? And what does it support for these men say about the government? Do you have anything to
Yeah.
add to this? It's,
Well, yeah, I mean,
I
it's
mean, these are
exactly the
ordinary
right
men
question for her to
at
have
the end
asked.
of the
Yeah.
day.
Well, I mean, every government is supported by some sort of thugs. The BJP has its share set, the Congress has its set, the Samajwadi Party has its set, the Trinamool has its set, the National Conference in Kashmir has its set, the PDP has its set of goons, and they need to tell their people that, yes, otherwise their support bases in these extrajudicial ways, which actually helps them, let's say, swing the vote in a crucial time in a marginal seat, or do stuff that is underhand that will swing or influence people in a particular area. It requires these non-state actors to always be in play. And if they see that the powers that be are not protecting their lot, then they'll stop doing what it takes. So it's very clear that every party needs to protect its set of goons to do these jobs so that it can keep power. And the BJP isn't the first to do it.
Yeah, the BJP isn't the first to do it.
If
But that
yeah, if
that
they say that
the
that's what
government
they've
goes
done.
out of its way to protect them, to
This is
release them.
why, because
Is
they
it,
can't allow so many people to think that they don't have these muscles to flex. They need to keep flexing these
you
muscles.
haven't seen such brazen ways in which, people who've committed heinous crimes being released like this earlier. And
Well,
this,
we have
does it
examples of this
signify
kind of.
that I let me put it this way, does it signify that they are trying to protect the ideas that these men espouse, what they symbolize?
Absolutely.
And how would you
Seems
frame
that
that?
way.
Yeah.
Seems that way because this is a not saying it and saying everything by not saying it is an absolutely magnificent way to keep power. You don't have to join the dots. People are joining the dots in their head, so you're never culpable legally, but you're culpable in all these extrajudicial ways all the time. And that is the real politics that people get. You know, when the home minister says termites need to be extinguished, and people join the dots in their own head, and they say, is he talking about Muslims? Is he talking only about terrorists? Is he mixing these two up deliberately so that we can't tell the difference? Is he saving himself legally but also saying what we want to hear? That's the kind of politics we all have got used to and have known. And we have to stop wanting that politics if we want it to change. But that at the moment, we want this politics. That's why it's being served up to us.
Yes, it is important for all of us to grapple with this question of how do we escape from this politics of hate? How do we deal with it? At the same time, we hope that struggles of women and of those who believe in peace with justice and those who are opposed to violent means to subjugate the other on the basis of caste, color, creed, community, and gender. It's not just about moving from one battle to another. We need to create enable a system of accountability and justice through better laws and effective implementation. And thank you, Revati Laul, for being one of the soldiers in doing that. And thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Anuradha. You're a fellow soldier. So, Inqilab Zindabad to you too.